right at the end of his missionary life. And the time that he was here, some 3 years, and it's right here that he wrote some of his amazing letters. Particularly, we know that he wrote the letter to the Romans.
He bowed himself down onto the earth, and he put his face between his knees. Who would like to show me the position that Elijah took? Because we have very few indications. There's a young, strong man. Come on, get over here. Who can do this? Can you help me out here?
Oh, Brian! All right, Brian.
Brian, I want you to do exactly what the Bible says. All right? So I'm going to read that to you again, because we have almost never been given the position of the intercessor. Here it is. He bowed himself down onto the earth, and he put his face between his knees. Did you do that? There he is. You notice that he's not looking at anything or anyone, and he says to his servant, "Go look," and there's the Mediterranean. Right? And he goes to the Mediterranean to look. This poor Gehazi, I feel so sorry for him. Think about it. And Gehazi comes back and he says, "There's nothing." And Elijah says, what does he say? "Go again." You don't get up. Go again.
Go again.
And he goes and he says, "There's nothing." And he goes and he says, "There's nothing." And he goes and he says, "There's nothing." And for 7 times, the Bible tells us, 7 is God's number, guys. It says, "Behold, a little cloud like the size of a man's hand." Now, I have a very large hand for a woman. So if I do this, is that big? Or this? Now, it took me months to get that organized, so I hope you like this. All right, so he comes back and he says, you know, that's redemption. That's redemption. For thousands of years, they said this was this horrific swamp. You know, when God says, "I'm going to bring you back and it's going to be better," this is a picture of going beyond where we once were. This is really redemption. And so now this is, as you can see, very, very fertile. We're looking at the Golan Heights over there, and you can see the volcanoes, all those. And she was healed. By the way, where was he going? You see how he's strutting forward? Where was he going? Do you remember this story? He was on his way to heal someone. Jairus' daughter. How old was she? 12. She was born when this woman started bleeding.
Yeah.
It's a picture. Do you see that? It's a picture of perfection. Both of them Jewish women, both of them helpless without the touch. This is not beyond orchestration. This is perfection. And we take Sabbath, but after the destruction of the Second Temple, that's when the synagogue goes into a whole nother phase and becomes the center of religious actions. But before that, we're talking about coming together on the Sabbath to read the books of Moses and to read the Haftarah, the prophetic portion. But we're not talking about the liturgy that we know now. We're not talking about rabbis like we know them now with smichot and things like that. We're talking about a very kind of loose organization, kind of like a community center. This came out of Babylon. This is the way that the children of Israel were kept together. All right, now why am I emphasizing this? This is where the whole concept comes from. It's not like, oh, well, the church figured it out and the Jews complied. No, it's the other way around. Out of the dispersion in Babylon and having to keep together as a people comes this institution that we call the Beit Knesset, which becomes known as the synagogue later on. This is the footprint. This is the basis of why you go to churches. Do you realize that? So you're a lot more Jewish than you thought you were. Now you're Messianic Gentiles who go to a version of a synagogue. Wait till you get home. Very tiny, insignificant little house. Imagine living in a house like that. No wonder the Lord says when He is here, foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has what? No place to lay His head. So imagine being a guest in a house that size. Remember what I told you yesterday, right? The husband and wife lived on a shelf. That's where all the bedding went during the daytime. The children lived on the thresh. They put the threshing on the floor, right? And that's why you have a thresh hole to your doorways to hold the thresh in, because that was the bedding. That was the bed. And then your children are like cordwood there, lined up against the door, all right? And that's where the Lord lay too, no doubt. Think of how much privacy was that. How about that?
Be quiet, said Jesus sternly. Come out of him. But the impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching? And with authority? He even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him." Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them.
and she thinks he's a lunatic already, and then he comes to Christ. And he was so isolated in this kibbutz, Chakuk, he thought for 2 years he was the only Messianic believer in the world. And when he met my husband and Shaul Zuela, he fell at their feet and wept. He was so happy that he wasn't the only one. He said, "What? You know too?" Amazing story. Such a simple man too, you know. He just doesn't try to put on any airs. Yeah, so it's precious. Don't forget these people. You don't get to meet everyone, but he's very representative. I mean, what a journey he was on. Then his wife wants to divorce him. Think about it. But she came to the Lord. Why? And we persevered in prayer.
Paradoxes, we call them paradoxes. How can you live in the world and still be part of the kingdom? And there's all these sections here. It's the ones who are going to enter the kingdom are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who are meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who are merciful, the pure in heart, peacemakers.
Stone, which of course is limestone, which is sedimentary rock, which allows for those seepage of water. On this side, if you look at the soil and look at the rocks on the right hand side, it's all basalt, all of it. And God allowed to break through this crust of this incredible plateau known as the Golan Heights, which exists really deep into Syria, if you were wise according to worldly standards. Nor many were powerful, nor were many of noble birth. But God has chosen that which is the foolishness of this world to put to shame the wise. And God has chosen that which is weak in the world to shame the strongest. And God has chosen that which is lowly and despised in this world, even the things that are not, to bring to nothing the things which are, so that no flesh might boast in the presence of God. That. Those are the chariots of Israel. Do you see those tanks there? Take your pictures. Those tanks are called the Merkavah. The Merkavot of Israel. Those are the tanks of Israel.
City.
Right, the year is 597 BC. The army of Babylon, led by the emperor of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar.
It wasn't anything like the exile into Egypt or anything like that. It's very different. We began to find all these different ways that people, when people take over another country, what they do to it.
Your foot shall tread. I have given it to you. Do you see the footprint? The heel? Do you see the toe? Do you see the central part? That's where the Ark of the Covenant was, in here. And this is where the altar was. Wait a minute, here. This is right over there. It's what we can't do today, but I wanted you to just see this. This is a very important find. It's rewritten history completely again. And it was found only 5 years ago.
The original sign. How old is that?
This is from the time of Joshua, 1200 BC. This is the place where Jeremiah once lived, Anatot. This is Anatot. And remember what he was told. Go and buy a field. And I'm waiting for them to find that jar. And you know, I'm just silly enough to believe that that jar could be unearthed. Although it was written on papyrus and I don't have a whole
whole lot of hope for papyrus having survived since the 6th century. But now we're leaving behind Anatot, going through the separation fence, and now we're entering Jerusalem. Welcome. Alright, so this is ancient Gibeah. We're passing it right now. And just so you have an eye or understanding of where it is. We're in Jerusalem, guys. Wow. The capital of Israel. That small area in between. So he extended the city to the, all right? So it went 1, 2, and now
what is the problem with that statue?
Clay and iron mix.
Well, no, they don't mix at all. That's the problem. Clay and iron. Iron is the Roman world. We're told that, so we don't have to be geniuses, right? But who's the clay? What's the clay? And all that uncut stone hits those toes. By the way, it's not the pieces, the toes. Let me ask you something. Right now, what are your toes doing?
Helping you balance.
Without toes, I had an aunt who had her toes cut off. Still couldn't stand. No balance whatsoever. She had to have crutches. You cannot stand without toes. Your toes are constantly rebalancing. The kingdoms of this earth will not stand. They are coming down. So think about that for a while. And now let's go in and see the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm going to ask you to give us the interpretation because I don't want to step on your toes.
that the Holy Spirit might come down upon them afresh, that they'd be continually filled with the Holy Spirit, and that they would know your power and your leading and direction, and your revelation, your breakthrough in their lives as they take this step. Take great baptize in you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Praise God! Breakthrough.
The cardo. Cardo meaning heart. You go to a cardiologist, the heart of the city is going to be here. And then you have another road. You see this one? That is the east-west road. And we're on it right now. This is the west, and there's the road going east. This is the Armenian quarter, this is the Christian quarter. The Muslim quarter is by far the biggest. We're going to spend a lot of time there. And the Jewish quarter is by far the smallest. All right? The only... So it's 102 years ago now. It was 1915 that the Armenians, who are the first Christian nation in the world, did you know that? No. The first Christian nation in the world is the Armenian country. Doesn't make any sense. How have you bought into Friday? I've always wondered.
Me too.
It never added up.
It never added up. So why didn't you say, well, there had to be something else going on here? And listen, I've seen people do backflips, and I really can count to 3, but that's about my limit. But, so, if he was crucified on the Thursday, he was buried before the night, right? So that's one day. Thursday night, Friday day, Friday night, Saturday day, and then he rose before light. That's why Mary didn't recognize him either, you know? I'm looking for my Lord, because it was still that time, all right? And remember, the first words that the Lord spoke in his risen body was, really loud, really loud. Think of that. He called out her name twice. It's amazing to me. All right. So. That's where he's going to return. And when that foot steps down, remember we learned what does it mean when a foot steps?
Takes
Authority
possession.
and possession. He's going to take his possession back. That foot is going to change the universe. Oh boy, get ready. Nothing that we know will still be the same. Praise the Lord. And that's why it's called the great and the awful or terrible day of the Lord. It's the great and the terrible altogether. For you who are waiting for him, it's the greatest moment of your life. For those who are not waiting for him, it will be the most terrible moment. Arise, Jerusalem, shake off the dust. Right? There was a great crowd in that place. And afterwards, Yeshua found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are now whole. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." And the man went away and told the Jews it was Yeshua who had healed him. And this is why the Jews, and I want you to know, if you've studied the Gospels, and I'm sure you have, this is a turning point. All right, they're not going to persecute him anymore. They're not going to be against Jesus anymore. Guess what they're going to do now? they're going to kill him. All right? This is like, no way. We're not going to allow this guy in Jerusalem to break the law. No, now we're going to kill him. And I want you to put yourself in the place of that man on the mat, because that's exactly where you were before salvation came to you. You were hopeless, you were helpless, you couldn't possibly change your circumstances. And today, you're risen with him. You sang those songs.